And without further ado, I will now turn it over to the instructor, Lisa Cooper. Lisa?
Thank you everyone for being here tonight. We've spent the past 6 class sessions writing and learning all about the world of fiction in an intro to fiction class. At the very onset of the class, I was just super excited at how much class participation there was. There was wonderful dialogue among the students. Students were participating and doing all their activities, and it just turned out to be a wonderful term together. We saw some amazing ideas crystallize and come to the page. And tonight I have the pleasure of introducing you to Diane. And Diane gave me a bio, and I'm going to go ahead and read that to you now. And then Diane's going to share some of her wonderful work. So it's been a real honor to work with ASAP and work with all the students, and I will surely miss our Thursday nights together. So the first reading will be a fiction piece by Diane Richards. Diane enjoys both memoir and fiction writing because they are complete opposites. She especially enjoys fiction because it allows one to shut off daily emergencies and put oneself in a new place or circumstance. Diane has been drafting short stories since middle school, but it never occurred to her to have anything published until she met the people at ASAP. In Diane's words, it's like finding your tribe of people who understand the passion of putting words down on paper, whether it will become a novel, a short story, poetry, or just words on paper. Diane is a retired military member's spouse returning to the workforce after caregiving. She is currently living in Norfolk, Virginia, off the Elizabeth River, surrounded by woodland creatures, often renaming them, like the night heron who resembles Bob Barker with his upright walk, pressed gray suit of feathers, and stark white hair. Diane is an active member of her community and enjoys travel and new experiences. She is currently working on creating a small business venture based on the Elizabeth River wildlife, riverwoodview.org, for a line of river-themed image products, which will also include a website blog. The website and business venture are a work in progress with an anticipated launch in late spring to early summer 2023. And I would just say on a side note that I have thoroughly enjoyed working with Diane. She brings such fresh enthusiasm to the classes and has been quite supportive of her fellow classmates as well. So thank you so much, Diane, for being here. And we will let you take it away and read as long as you would like.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm kind of excited to get more than 5 minutes, maybe. Because my 5-minute cutoff was not exactly where I wanted it to be. I did have a piece that we were working on during class. And as I told you, after I worked on it during class, I realized it wasn't quite what I was hoping for. She went in a different direction. I'm going to have to work on her. So do I give you the introduction of what it's called so far?
That sounds great. You can give us any background you want, or you can just dive right in.
Okay. It's actually called Reflections, and I've been working on this for probably 2 years. I pull it out, put it back in a drawer, pull it out, put it back in a drawer. So I'll go ahead and get started with that. Let's see. Parks were Chris's favorite escape from daily chores. Even in the middle of this city, the park seemed miles away from anything or anyone. Tired of daily calls and collection emails, the job itself was not rewarding, neither was the pay or the colleagues. It did cover her rental, insurance, and allowed free time over the weekends, i.e. the marathon 2 days for errands and cleaning. But thankfully, the park forgave her for her lack of ambition to be aggressive at work or love. The park was quiet, peaceful, beautiful in winter or full summer. Whoever built this park had Chris in mind. Rolling hills, a winding dirt path through trees, complete with a cove that came in from the main river. Wildlife seemed to come alive between 5 and 7 a.m. Foxes, raccoons, possums, squirrels, all the birds, and of course the fish. They seemed to come out more in the mornings of late fall, beautiful in their high jumps and water ringlets. Chris loved to come out in the morning and count the fish. It was like counting sheep, but instead of falling asleep, she drifted from her chaotic weekly calls to the sound of fish leaping, birds calling, and small animals leaving tracks in the fallen leaves. Every now and then, while lying on back on the pier, she could hear the animals as far as the other side of the cove. Peaceful, quiet, without distraction, without people, without phone or emails, just lovely silence. Lying on the pier, eyes closed, knees up, hair scattered everywhere, Chris was counting fish. 6, 7. It was a peaceful Saturday morning. The sky was overcast, and that's when the animals seemed to be most active. She could hear the fox crossing the path just before the pier, the crab scratching under the piling. It was the perfect morning silence, interrupted at once by footsteps on the pier. Sitting up, she sat, half expecting to see a large man at the sound of the footfalls. Surely she heard boots, hard winter boots, hitting the pier, headed away from her, but nothing. Eerily quiet, the crab stopped. Sharp lines were visible in the wet grass left by small creatures, but she saw no one. Even the fish seemed to sense a change as the cove became a sheet of glass. Exhaling, her breath cooled in front of her as she tried to calm herself and listen. She had never heard anything at the lake that sounded like a person this early in the morning. Checking her cell phone, yes, it was early, 5:18 a.m. The calming park looked suddenly too far from the city, too isolated, too dark. She grabbed her messenger bag and walked the pier, searching the tree line for signs of shadows. Nothing. On the path, she heard nothing, no birds, no animals. The silence was almost suffocating. Mist was moving and blanketing this cove, swiftly taking over the pier as she walked towards the pathway. No sounds interrupted its slow crawl. Arriving at her Prius, she noticed small marks in the dew that had settled on the driver's door. The markings almost looked like a person had been pressed against it. Looking around, listening carefully for sounds of footsteps, anything. She opened the back seat, putting her bag down, checking like every single woman does for anything amiss, a person, anything, and was grateful to find nothing. Once inside the car, she turned on the heater. When did it get so cold? She didn't turn on the radio. She was still listening intently for anything that would explain the way she was feeling, like being watched. Nothing grabbed her, nothing jumped out on the road out of the park, nothing happened, but Chris could not shake the feeling that something indeed had happened that morning. Should I go on or stop?
Please keep going as long as you'd like.
Okay.
This
Okay.
is very reminiscent so far to me of Where the Crawdads Sing so far. Just a little.
I haven't seen or read that yet. That's on my list now. Alarm buzzing, rolling over to stop the disturbance, dreaming, not holding the memory, reaching for the alarm, followed by sound of plastic sliding across the nightstand, hitting the floor painfully. Please, not another broken cell phone. Quick shower and dress, long hair up, running flats on, thinking that thank heavens she lives in a beach town that doesn't worry over heels and fashion. There's never enough time for it. Quick bowl of oatmeal, grabbing keys and out the door. Another relief of small towns is a short commute. Downside, good jobs are hard to come by. Collections seemed easy, monotonous, allowing Chris time to zone out and fill her mind with coursework. Emails were easy, phone calls not so much. In the age of faceless business, getting screen time, but no actual FaceTime. Surely this could be done telecommute. Apparently not. Each day seemed like a race to the time clock. She always left with plenty of time, but there'd always be that one driver who suddenly realized they needed to get gas or breakfast, or just realized the right lane ended. Of course the lane ended, but there's right and dead wrong. Better to give them plenty of room. SUVs bigger than life, many cars that think they are small enough to make the squeeze. Honestly, the drive was about 15 minutes in all, but packed with crazy just the same. Definitely better than the highway. Turning on the big box as it warmed up with its blinking list of emails, to Chris, it was just that, a big box. Computers were great. Press the button and voila. Beyond that, she had no clue, would rather be outside than trapped in front of a computer screen any day. Morning meetings filled with questions that weren't really meant to be answered. The small windowless room was suffocating to Chris. Colleagues lined up in chairs around the table. It was a small department. You'd think they could get along, but everything in every day was a competition. Who had the most calls, whose reports were done first, who worked the most overtime, who had the most cleared each month. Chris had a way of talking with her collections that seemed to just flow. She listened, gave options, heard the colleague on the other end say they were moving, their child was getting married, starting school or having difficulties. The collections were not person to person, but business to business. Still, Chris listened. She really did like people. She just didn't like the competition surrounding her daily work. Kelly, the department manager, stood up over the table and staff announcing, Chris completed her reports early. I'm guessing this means her accounts are so easy, we're going to move the accounts around to make it fair for everyone. Each staff will have a mixture of accounts based on difficulties. You will get your list emailed to you after the meeting. Also, Chris is so efficient with her reports, she will sit with each of you this week and provide training. Chris cringed. She knew the compliments were really a slap in the face. Oh, sorry, it moved. There it is, sorry. After each meeting, she had been given the most difficult accounts other colleagues were unable to clear. It was as if she was trapped in a revolving door. She spent long hours tediously going over each entry, looking for any balances or explanations that provided a reason why the company was not paying. Most of the time, she discovered issues within her own company, missed invoices, missed discounts, missing or damaged goods, or even billed to the wrong company. She couldn't help but feel that it was never good enough. She would clean up the account and then be told to move it to another colleague's difficult account. Every time she had cleared up a big account, the announcement was made, not that she had accomplished anything, just that she still had more work to do. Of course, the compliment on her reporting caused resentment from colleagues. Chris couldn't see what they were so envious over. She rearranged her schedule based on company load. She even took on early lunch just to make sure she was available for her when her companies were. Couldn't they do the same? She had shared everything she knew worked for her when she had the accounts. She made introductions, provided Excel templates, gave suggestions, anything she thought might help them. She also had trained each of them on reporting multiple times. So out of the revolving door, she went back to her desk, waiting for her blinking email containing her new company listing. She couldn't wait for the early lunch, but not being paid for it just added to the long day. 5 never comes soon enough. Monday down, only 4 more to go. Count the rain days, hot days, slow days, busy days, counting down to Friday. Not for parties, dates, or people, but peace and quiet alone in the park. Skip that part. I don't like that part. She went to the gas station. I didn't like that part. I'm sorry. She took a deep breath. It was finally Friday, and she was on her way, escaping people in daily life. Arriving at the park, she walked down the path and noticed footprints on the pier. Long, pointed shoe prints per step, somewhat between a boot and a heel. Odd, it had not rained the last 2 days. Dew had evaporated in the morning hours, yet here they were, crisp prints halfway up the pier, leading away from the cove. No signs of a fall or other prints, just one set of wet boot prints. Chris sat on the pier, staring back at the path in the direction of the boots. She heard muffled sounds as if a radio playing in the distance that seemed to carry over the water flowing underneath the pier. Leaning over the pier, hair drifting with the ripples in the water, she asked herself, what was that sound? A splash across the lake caught her attention, wings turning the surface as an osprey pulled up its catch. Her eyes followed as the fish escaped, swimming, rippling long lines of white cascading towards her. Rather large fish for this cove, she thought. Seeking refuge under the pier, she guessed. Long, so very long, swimming quickly and in a matter of moments close beneath her. There was a shimmering light under the ripples, mesmerizing. Suddenly, the air around Chris felt as if it had been swept through her. Tunneling air, taking her breath, pulling, then pushing, keeping her still, frozen in place. Too stunned to move or call out, something came out of the water, leaping over her, cascading a shower of pine needles as a blanket brushed her forehead, trailing down her back. As the air returned, she had to catch herself from falling forward from the motion. Fear sank at the sound of the footfalls, heavy with weight, wide with each step. Chris turned looking between strands of tossed hair. Before her stood a man nearly 6 feet, draped in a blanket. Crisp chips of ice hung from him as he stood just feet from where she knelt, precariously close to the edge of the pier. Motionless, she sat, not for sure if it was better to swim or take her chances running past. He moved towards her, arms reaching, revealing a knife blade under his blanket as he reached for her. Swim, it was obvious. She threw herself backwards over the water as the air escaped her lungs. She felt the cold hitting her arms, hair whipping around. The last thing she heard was his deep voice calling out, "No." Every fiber of her being throbbed. She was sprawled across the stone flooring, shivering, wet, covered with ice chips. She heaved several times, but nothing came. Racked with cold, her body shook involuntarily. She was too cold to open her eyes. She had never been so chilled. The pain was all she could concentrate on. She could feel a solid object at her back, but could not turn to see it. Muffled voices coming through the water. Where was the water? She felt a rush of air as she was lifted, warmth from their breath and hands like knives through her skin. The darkness and silence. Perhaps she had slipped too far under. She woke under a thick blanket, feeling the warmth slowly coming up from the foot of the bed. Turning her head cost her too much, and she began dry heaving again. She soon realized she was hungry. She felt a hand brush hair away with a damp cloth. The soothing voice of a woman with a thick accent, almost Irish, or was that Scottish? Too thick to understand, with her head in a fog. Then the voice she could not escape, even in fitful dreams. His voice was deep, steady, not soothing, but irritated. Trying to raise from the bed, the woman struggled to keep her in place, but the man simply pushed a hand on her shoulder, and she was forced to be compliant, pushed deep in the bedding. Straining to open her eyes, she could only see his back, a large brown cloak, which she had mistaken for a blanket. The woman was more of a girl, young with large brown eyes. She was petite, yet tall, hair pinned up like a schoolmistress. She talked with the man while he kept his one hand on her. His agitation did not subside. A door opened and light footsteps crossed the floor. She could hear a younger man's voice, but her view was blocked by the girl and the man. She could tell by his tone he was apologizing, then defensive, then apologizing again. Definitely young. The girl said nothing, actually turned away from them, back to Chris, with an expression clearly wishing to be anywhere but here. The older man raised his voice, gesturing to Chris. She was only able to catch a few words. Yep. Sorry. She was only able to catch a few words. How? Why? If he finds her, we cannot take her back. Where was she? Who was this person they spoke of? She tried to stay conscious, but was overcome by fatigue as her eyelids betrayed her, bringing her back into the darkness. Chris awoke to the young woman's smile, encouraging her to sit up in bed. She pulled a chair to the bedside, producing a bowl of broth. The accent was so thick, but she spoke slowly, as if knowing Chris could not understand. You, yes, you, bringing the bowl closer. You eat, stop retch, warm you well. She wanted to reach the spoon, but her arms were too weak, and so the girl began to spoon feed her slowly. Yes, almost instantly the desire to heave passed, and she could not remember when the cold had left her. A knock on the door, and the girl leaned back, looking towards the sound. The door opened as light footsteps entered. She shook her head as he approached the bed. Enough? Your father will be most displeased. He wasn't as young as she thought, perhaps late teens, not much younger than herself. She could clearly see he was related to the man, most definitely his father. Light brown hair, bright honey-colored eyes, tall, maybe taller than his father. Richard, said the young woman, honestly, he will flay you, don't you think? I'm not sure if you're lucky she survived or not. So she will survive. Ah, I did not push her. She actually jumped. Why, I have no good idea, but she did. Perhaps you frightened her into the portal. No, she knew exactly where to jump. Yes, most portals know exactly how to fall aimlessly into a space they cannot see. Moline, you are unfair here. She did. I saw her jump. Father was close, but not close enough. He tried to reach her and pull her back, but she threw herself into the portal. Ah, nothing more reassuring than two large men appearing from thin air trying to grab you. You really are being unfair. I tell you, she threw herself into it. Threw myself into what? They had clearly forgotten she was there, speaking over her. Clearly forgotten they were there until the man returned. What are you doing here? I've told you not to enter this room. Moline, you have more important things to do than stand around here. She will be fine and we will release her. She is not our problem. He will discover her and she needs to be far from here when he does. Moline looked back at Chris. She looks harmless. What could she possibly do? Her presence alone will bring him. Moline tried again. He wouldn't come here. He's never come this far. For her, he will. Now leave her broth and return to the kitchen. Richard, you should wait for me below. They both left the room, leaving her with the man. He was angry, looking threatening. She was still too fatigued to leave the bed, sinking under the blankets, fear rising as he approached. You can't possibly understand the danger we are all in. You simply did not exist until this moment, and he will know the portal was open. He will not know that you came through, but he will still look. Turning, talking to himself. Why was he so daft? How could he have gone through? Why did you have to jump? I jumped because you came at me. I was trying to prevent you from falling. Are you so young you cannot see danger? I'm not that young, and I didn't fall. I jumped. I was going to swim. Well, you didn't swim. You fell. Where did I fall? And if I fell, why did you fall? I didn't fall. I came after you. You simply cannot understand and are not supposed to be here. Great, I'll just get up and go home. Really? How? You don't understand portals. No one truly understands them. You can end up anywhere. Where are we? He stopped pacing, turning, looking over her as if she were a task, not a person. I do not know you are fully here. That is the explanation of a portal. You are not allowed in or out, not exiled, but executed. Portals pose threats. They come with weapons, knowledge, dangerous persuasion. I'm a klutz. I only pose a danger to myself. Weapons, really? I left my bag on the pier. The only item on me is a hair holder. Ooh, stand back. I'll make a ponytail. He looked at her, puzzled, not sure if she was attempting to be combative. It does not matter what you are. He will still come. You look so out of place, your skin, your eyes, then your clothes, and that horrible accent. I can follow your words, but it's impossible to ignore. My accent, you mutter. I barely heard you yell no. You heard me, yet you jumped? When you put it like that, of course I jumped. If I had any strength, I'd be out that door. He watched as her face fell, tears brimming in her eyes. Fatherly instincts catching up, he pulled a chair out and sat, not by the bed, but between the bed and the door. I really just want to go home. It's not that simple. We will not harm you, but we cannot shelter you either. Once he knows you are here, nothing will stop him. Once who? Lord Farrant, as he likes to be called. Not that you'll find many this side willing to call him Lord of anything. I don't know if telling you anything would help you or harm my people. I saw you sitting aimlessly, carefree, with no care for anything or anyone. Here, everyone must care for everyone, for each other. I must care for all of my people, and you are not just an outsider, but a portal. It is dangerous for us all. Maybe I can go back through the portal. Maybe. Many have tried. You are not the first to pass through. As I've said, you have no need to fear my people, but my people have the reason to fear your presence. Richard rushed into the room. Riders, 6 coming through the valley, armed? Yes, it's too late. Bring her. Richard looked sick with fear and guilt. I'm sorry. Apologize when you think it matters. Bring her. Reflections have no right, no life, no sympathy, no place here. Chris knew she should flee, but her body would not move. Richard swept her into his arms in one quick move, rushing the stone steps through the multiple entryways. She was lost in a maze. He stopped in a large room, laying her on top of a table at the head of what looked like a hall. Why couldn't she move? Doors flying open, 6 men dressed for ancient battlegrounds entered. Armor, real metal armor, clashing with blades hanging at their sides. This has to be a dream. Bad food, I hit my head. This is not real. One of the 6 broke from the pack, approaching her as if she were a snake about to strike. Do they always look like this? You will see this portal was not as the others. Have you received word? Any riders from the north? No, only you and your company, Lord Allen. Duke Ronan, if we need titles, I know you're mine. How came this portal to you? Do you have markings that will prove she is yours? Ronan turned his gaze to Richard, then sighed. Yes, Richard Cross. Allen gave a deep hissing breath, thought to speak, but then decided to listen to Ronan's explanation. She jumped. Has she been here before? No, lost and still recovering. A man from the back stepped forward. Kill her now and remove the mark. She is our responsibility. How can we kill what we brought here against their will? Another man from the group stepped aside. Tall auburn hair, dark complexion with deeply tanned skin and green eyes. Reflections have no will, no purpose. Keep her if you like, but I'll have no part in this matter. Tamora, you're already here. How will you avoid it now? Allen looked at from Tamora to Ronan. Your decision is final then? Yes, we will keep her. Say she is a niece. Clothing will help work on the accent. Perhaps working in the valley will add color. We will claim she was a sickly child. We will not kill her, but we will keep her. She will not be your problem. Tamora humphed. Rest assured, she is not. Tamora, you have my word. If it comes to pass, it will be dealt with. Chris could do nothing but listen as they decided her fate. Limbs began to tingle, her head slipped, hitting the table. Attention was not what she wanted at this moment. Impossible to slip past, counting young Richard, Duke Ronan, Tamora, Lord Allen, and 4 more whose names she did not know. Past the men stood young Moline, just inside the door, her expression tight-lipped, cheeks stark white. Would she help her? She looked too frail to be much assistance against the heavily armed men. Why were they so armed? Did they think she really posed a threat? Playing weak could just get her killed later. She flung her legs over the table, dropped her feet to the floor, and concentrated, putting one foot in front of the other. Aiming for the door, she made it just between the men, and then her legs crumpled beneath her. She heard the air rush past as she fell for the stone flooring. She anticipated a grab, trying to fall backwards, only to land in Alan's arms. Ronan threw up his hands. And now you see, she just flings herself. Stop moving, no one will harm you. Alan's bright green eyes bored into her. Ronan, I see what you mean, but yelling rarely works with babes or women. Okay, Alan, your turn. Ronan stepped back, leaning over Chris, blade in Alan's arms. Alan looked up. Moline, wine, please, Richard, chair. Now, miss, said Alan, lifting her like a paper doll. We need to ask you a few things. Are you alone? No. There's you, Ronan, Richard, Moline. No, I mean, are you traveling alone? Did you come here alone? I was at the park alone. Well, I had originally thought I was alone. Then I saw Ronan. Tamora leaned over her. You are in the habit of going out alone without escort? What kind of lady are you? Independent, of course. What kind of men are you holding a woman against her will? Alan took a deep breath. Tamora, please, one voice. So you are alone. What weapons do you have in your possession? Weapons? I don't own any. I've shot a 9mm. Heck, I've even done archery in school, but weapons? Do you mean weapons of mass destruction, bombs and the like? You'd have to be military to get your hands on that, or crazy terrorists. But I'm just me. All I have are the clothes on my back and a ponytail holder. What? Oh, sorry. It's really just a hairpin. May I see this hairpin? Sure. Somewhere in this pocket. There. It's like a rubber band. You just pull your hair through it and voila, ponytail. May I see it closer? Yes. Thank you. Alan plucked it from her hands. This, along with the clothes, must be burned. If you keep her, it will be your burden. But all foreign articles must be destroyed. It's a ponytail holder. It's a sign you don't belong. Ronan, we will give you the seasons. If we are questioned, we will deny knowledge of her or any portal opening. I will see you at the spring opening. You may bring her if she has behaved well and adapted fairly. This is fair. I thank you. What is fair? Chris asked, but they ignored her question. A light meal should be served shortly, Richard began. Alan responded, no, this was not our original destination. I do hope to see you again at the spring opening, miss. In a whirl of coats, they were gone.
Yay.
It was a lot.
All right.
I would love, before we close out, I would love to hear about your process. I mean, this in the beginning, it reminded me of Where the Crawdads Sing, and then it moved into Outlander, because I'm such a huge Diana Gabaldon fan. I don't know if you've read any of her books or seen the show.
I've read all of Diana's and I've seen all the shows.
I mean, I'm just such a huge fan of her. So you really had me, you instantly captivated me. So tell me a little bit about your process and how you came up with the idea and where does the story go?
Now you had said once that if you read something or you found a character in someone else's book that you liked, I found a character in someone else's book that I liked so much. And it is, I think the book was A Man Rides Through. And the version of it is, it's a mirror that is actually a portal. And the person that they talked about was a brother who was down the sidelines, but he's a captain of the guards.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, whatever happened to the captain of the guards? So this is not the story he wrote, but I liked that character enough that was where I wanted to go with it. So we haven't met him yet. He's in there somewhere.
Do you see this turning into a novella or a full-length novel, or?
I'm not quite sure. this is probably really a very, very short introduction is what I would say, because she still has to go through the periods. And you come to find out later that the way that she came, portals, whenever they come through, they don't die. So she will go through generations.
Oh, okay, okay. So she'll be eternal and go through. Okay, okay, okay.
So
Very
you'll end up
interesting.
meeting different people through the generations.
Right.
And then you'll also you'll find the heartbreak of what it is to be immortal, what it is to have connections and lose them hand over fist every single time. And how desperate would you be to go back? And she does discover that what was on the other side is no longer there.
Oh, so she can't go back, even if she had the magical powers to do so, she could not return.
But because the way that I see it at this point, the vision that she sees on the other side is she does try to go back, because Richard does feel sorry for her and he does try to take her through. And when they see it, it's like the nuclear holocaust has gone through. And that's what they see on the other side of the mirror, because you can see through it. Now everything's burned. There's green smoke. You can't, it's like, could you survive it?
Yeah.
So it's the going back and forth. Should she stay where she is, where she can't die? Or should she just make the leap and go home where she was supposed to be to begin with?
Did you ever see the movie Time Bandits years ago in the 1980s?
So
with the little people? Yeah. And they come up against a glass, and when they shatter the glass, they can't go past it because and when they shatter it to try to get through it, it's like this horrific world on the other side. And that's what you just reminded me of. So what a fascinating layered story. You didn't mention this story at all in class. So this is a real treat for me to have I mean, especially since you put so much work into it.
This one was much longer, and I'm one of those check the box people. I like the short ones.
Yes, I do too. I'm more of a personal essay person myself. Yeah. So
yeah, the other one seemed a lot easier, and it was easier to pick the pieces apart on somebody I hadn't made yet versus somebody that I had made.
That makes total sense. Remember, we talked about in class, like really spending time with a new character before even writing, like getting to know that character, having conversations with the character, and so much is like brainstorming ahead of time before you actually sit down to the page. Because I felt like with this piece that you shared, you really know your character, like inside and out. And actually the other characters as well came across very well portrayed too. So I feel like you've spent a lot of headspace with your characters.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because Cindy's actually read this I've read it to her a couple of times. The funny part is that after taking the class, I think there was a part of, well, we don't know your character well enough. What's the backstory? What's the rest of it? So in my original, she started out on the pier with the boot prints. So it's not like as if you didn't know anything about her job, you didn't know anything about anything else about her. I'm like, okay, I got to flesh that out a little more. And I still feel that there's character quirkiness that still needs to be addressed. That's obviously not there yet.
Yeah, but I really appreciated seeing like her day-to-day work life and before she actually went to the pier. So I felt like I kind of got a little bit of an idea of who she was in her ordinary life before going into this extraordinary world.
Yeah, I figured it would give me more grounds for flashbacks of comparison, because they do actually put her into the field to work. And she compares it to what we have to what it is now. She does end up with like military, not really military, but out into the she follows with the captain. That's how she meets him. She ends up in their encampment, and so she ends up learning that side of it. It's interesting, she ends up learning different pieces of different parts of the culture, because she lives forever. She doesn't age. So the problem is you can only stay in one place for so long.
And does she take different portals to get to the other places? It just evolves, just time evolves.
Time evolves around her and she is stuck. we all think we want to live forever, but, and
I remember having conversations with my grandmother because she lived till she was 97 and her mom till 105. And they both said that the hardest part of aging for them was seeing so many of their loved ones pass away, and still being present, So very interesting concept to write about. And I would love to hear some of your memoir work as well. I didn't know that you wrote memoir until you sent me your intro. Yeah. So
I have a couple of them. We did, I went to Scotland because my mother's from Scotland and I'm first generation. So I went overseas and met my mother's family for the very first time, saw how my mother grew up and learned a lot about her. And I actually started a memoir for that. And I also have another one. I went to Scottsdale, Arizona as my very first trip after my divorce.
it's a good place to go after a divorce. Yeah. It's wonderful. Monica, Jeanette, do you have any questions for Diane?
Yeah, no questions, but I really like the imagery and like the contrast at first, like it starts off just depicting the natural scenery, and then it goes into the office, almost like a like co-worker jealousy thing, like an uncomfortable kind of mood, which I thought it was like a nice contrast between this peaceful scenery and then now we're in this office place where everyone just surrounded by people, but there's no connection and everyone is kind of mean to each other. And I really like the idea of human connection, just kind of going deeper into that, especially with the idea of like immortality and losing those connections over time. Just because in my personal life, I grew up, I didn't have a lot of connections. I was very fearful of connecting with anyone. And it went like that for probably 14, 15 years. And, I'm, all I can say is, my family dynamic wasn't the best. So I didn't have a lot of connections until now when I'm 24. So I can definitely say, human connections are important. And like a part of my life where I didn't have anyone to talk to for weeks it felt like lost time, or like that big chunk of my life was not there. So I do just like the idea of just human connection, and even if it's in a fictional setting, just because I feel that's like a major part of what it means to be human.
Yeah, I completely appreciate that. And that's the thing I was trying to show in the beginning, is she has no connection to what is in front of her. And then she is thrown into a world where everyone cares for everyone because that's how they live. That's the only way to live. And if you think about Indian tribes, that's probably one of the best examples. They either everybody hunted and fed together, or they didn't make it through the winter.
Yeah, everyone's
that's pretty much the community that she has been, where she fell into.
I did have a question. I wanted to know what made you just like write from this perspective. Like it's, the jumping is so interesting, like, because I was in the beginning, I was hearing, and then I started hearing like, swords and clanking together. And it's like, wait, what's happening over here? So what made you, number one, write this specific piece like in this way, and want to show this type of the dynamic, how you even explained it ultimately, like, how it's important, like we think we want to be here forever, but what made you want to do it that way?
As far as the way that I wrote it, I like the speed. When I'm reading something, I want it to move. I've read so many different kinds of pieces and I have a short attention span. So I need it to go fast. I don't necessarily need action, but I need a reason to keep going. So I like the faster pace. Why I did the connection because I just think that there are so many people today with technology. Look at the computers, look at the cell phones, look at the tablets. We are connected in so many ways, but physical connection, actual connection, we are so segregated into our jobs and what this person does, what that person does. But if you think about it, the person I admire the most is always the garbage man. He gets paid, but think about it, he gets paid extremely well because he handles hazardous waste every single day of his life. He gets up every day at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock and picks up the garbage. Without him, what would happen? He is a very firm person in our community who is unrecognized and unacknowledged as being part of your community. And people complain all the time, oh, the garbage man did this, the garbage man did that. You don't really know that, guys. You don't know. I mean, you go to work, you go to the office, and you know that person had, a root canal. You know that person had a funeral to go to. You know something about them. But the poor garbage man, my goodness, he forgot your garbage that one day. He'll be back next week. But you don't know what his backstory is. So I think it's the whole version of community that we don't have. We don't care as much about the person next door.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
I was thinking about how my first trip to Europe and their trash was like everywhere. Like you couldn't find a garbage can to save your life. And, so that's what made me think of that. We don't realize how wonderfully clean our country, is in terms of waste disposal. But I also think that theme of human connection is so important. And Jeanette, I'm glad you touched on that.
Yeah. Because growing up, I was, I guess, in a way conditioned just to be afraid of people. So I was a shut-in. I stayed home all the time, and it was like that until I went to college, and then at college I stayed in the dorms all the time, so it wasn't really any different. Graduated college, then I would stay at home all the time, and then it's only been the past year that I'm actually, I branched out and tried to connect with people, and it's just like, it's almost like sometimes it feels like too much, just because it's like, man, I had so much time that I was surrounded by people. I go to school, I'm surrounded by people. I go to work, I'm surrounded by people. I'm at home and I have family members there, but it's just there's this prolonged isolation that, to be frank, is just, like mental illness. But, just the prolonged isolation is, it takes time, but it can really crumble someone's mental fortitude and their touch on reality. And that's why I've, just my personal life, I found that human connection is so important. It doesn't really matter how long, we live, but if there's no human connection, I feel like, this is me personally, it's almost meaningless, because those 10-15 years that I lived in mostly isolation, I don't remember any of it, because every day felt the same over and over. So then this past year, reached out to people and tried to branch out more, and it's been more meaningful and almost joyous than those all those years that I've been just stuck in my room and on the phone, on the computer, on the TV, whatever. I used to spend hours on the computer doing stuff, and I can't even remember what it was. So yeah, that's why I'm definitely on board with the human connection, whether it's in mortality or long aging, whatever, because that's just like I feel like it's so important, and because it's so important, it's like a universal thing that everyone needs.
Definitely landed in a good group with the
Yeah, absolutely.
Groups, so many different cultures, different personalities, different ages. There's a large group of people people with the ASAP. That's the one thing I did find extremely interesting,
Mhm.
because I think I joined a class the other day and there was somebody in a different country. And then there's
Oh.
people in different, because there's a meetup once a month for writing the ASAP. And there's a couple people that come from different countries for that.
Oh.
Yeah, even in our own class, we had a huge range of ages and backgrounds and writing styles and genres. And, you know, I really enjoyed for all the different vantage points that we had. It was very refreshing. And no, I don't think any two people had the same genre that they were writing in. Everyone was writing from, you know, we had everything from fantasy to historical fiction to romance to paranormal thriller. It was a great class.
It's also a free space where people can say, there's no judgment. You can say anything you want. You can talk about your topic. I know at first I felt extremely silly because the piece that I had brought to the class was a rom-com, and everybody else had these extremely serious pieces.
They did. They really did.
Oh, well, okay.
Oh, but I was so glad you brought that because we needed a little levity. We needed a little lightness, you know, for some of the topics were really heavy, and that's okay. But it was a nice compliment to have a rom-com mixed in. You know, so. Well, I will be back in the spring for ASAP and doing an intro to memoir class. And you can also find me at The Muse in Norfolk and themuse.org. I don't really have any other announcements. So Monica, I'm going to turn it over to you. And just Diane, thank you so much for showing up tonight and sharing your wonderful story with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me share. I feel better about my writing now. That's great.
Absolutely should.